Thank you so much for coming. My name's Matt and I'm one of the festival team here today. Moving Parts 2025 has been going on for a little while already. We had 2 weeks of puppetry workshops and then they went up to a parade that we had on Saturday, and then we've had some workshops going on this week, and now we're going into the sort of thrust or the last kind of sprint of the festival with shows at Northern Stage. And a really key part of that element of the festival, the build up to the festival and the parade, is our guest today. So please join me in welcoming Chloe Rodham. So, hi Chloe.
Hello.
Thank you. So I think what we'll do is kind of start by you telling us how you're involved in this festival itself. I kind of hinted that you were very involved with the parade workshops, but you've been involved with Moving Parts for many, many years now, and also in lots of different ways as well. So let's start by having a bit of a overview of who you are professionally and your involvement in Moving Parts.
Yes, okay. So I would call myself an animator and maker. And in this festival, I've been very involved over the last couple of weeks making headdresses and small puppets with participants from all kinds of different community groups to be part of the parade this year, which was the theme of underground. So making rabbits and foxes and badgers and also mushrooms, and then puppets like wiggly worms and that kind of thing, and also dressing part of the main puppet, which was the metro train, so covering that with mushrooms and helping participants to create those things throughout the last couple of weeks, which has been absolutely fantastic.
And we should say, if you're interested and don't know, there's an exhibition of that over at the Great North Museum. Lots of pictures online, so you can get really immersed in kind of the parade materials this year. Yes. Yeah, but you've been involved, it's kind of to backtrack, that's like 2 weeks of like intensive working with participants. What's kind of involved in that run up?
So there's a lot of preparation and planning that goes into that before the event itself, because with having lots of different groups, we've had like many kind of scouts come to work with us, and then we've had adults coming in groups or individuals coming along to make something as part of the parade. So it's planning so much in advance as to how that's going to be possible, because everyone's got very different skill set, different things that they want to get involved with. So it's making sure that that's possible for everyone. So planning lots of component pieces for them to be able to create the headdresses and things like that. Painting lots of paper, because as part of the festival this year, we decided to go for quite a painterly look for it, but doing all of that in advance so that the participants would create like a collage effect on their headdresses. So yes, meters and meters of painted paper. Yes. This is an example from last year. The theme was seabirds, kittiwakes. So this is an example of one of the kittiwake costumes. And Rosie Bristow made the fabric-based costumes, and I was making the headdresses, which ranged from bird heads to nests and things like that. So lots of planning went into that as well.
And then this was the amazing kittiwake automata.
Yes. So this was very simple automata that was operated by a person kind of turning it, and it would have it has a wheel on it, so that there was puffins that were chasing fish as it turned. So that was a really nice thing to be able to make as well. And I think the thing about the festival is that we have all these ideas at the beginning of things that we want to make. We know the headdresses are going to be part of it and the costumes are going to be part of it, but then there's ideas that start forming throughout the festival as well, where people get excited about making things, and there's kind of a few stretch goals, a few things that are part of Karen's wish list of things that would be amazing to have, and then those things start becoming a reality, and it gets really exciting as creative people, because we're all a creative team, start kind of inputting additional things in there that we kind of want to make and think will be really good as part of it as well.
Yes. Yeah, so Karen, the artistic director, has the sort of vision for what the parade's going to be, and then it's kind of down to you to realise that. So last year was Kitty Wakes, this year Toon Underground, and then...
and the year before that was the seahorses and things like that as well. So that was part of it was very much city themed. So we were looking at the architecture of Newcastle and kind of hidden stories within that. Like, lots of people go past the Civic Centre every single day but don't necessarily notice the seahorses on top of it, and the tiny seahorses right on top of the building as well. So it was lovely to bring lots of those things to life in large scale building, costumes, and all sorts of other things related to the sea.
So it's a huge part of what you do for the festival is this workshop delivery, and we'll talk about some of the other stuff you do for the festival as well. Also, Whirl a Bird workshop that's coming up.
Yes, so that's at the weekend. So I'm going to be running a Whirl a Bird workshop, which is going to be a wheeled puppet. So it's going to be focused on flightless birds. So it's got a wheel underneath the puppet, and the legs kind of look like this, kind of scampering along as you wheel the puppet along. So that's going to be really nice over the weekend.
So really good beginner's course. If people are interested, do look that up. So I would love also to talk a little bit about your background as an animator and how that then feeds into your work for us. So your initial kind of contact with moving parts was through the stop motion animation course, and I guess that's sort of your practice as well. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so from being like really little, I've always enjoyed making things, all kinds of different things, and just bringing materials together to create drawings and models and that kind of thing. And when it got to choosing the sort of thing I'd like to do in life, animation seemed like it was a really good fit, because you can combine lots of different making practices into animation. You need to tell a story somehow, and you can use anything to do that. So it felt like I could continue doing all the things I love doing, like photography and making as part of that. So I studied animation at Farnham in Surrey. And then I specialised in stop motion animation there. And I came back up to the northeast, and I still was working on stop motion animation. But opportunities were quite few and far between up here. There's not a big stop motion scene as there is in other places in the UK. So I started to do commercial work that was a little bit more digital as well. So looking at After Effects and the Creative Cloud suite, and making animations in that way as well. And making and stop motion was still very much a passion for me. And I saw that Moving Parts Arts had a call out for a stop motion commission, which was to create a short animation based on the mascots of the festival. So there are lots of different characters. Hang on, I've got an image of this. So there are lots of different characters as part of the festival that were designed by Rachel Horner. And the commission was to develop a concept that Caroline Hardacre had written. It was a short kind of paragraph concept to take that further into a stop motion animation piece. And I got that commission, which was fantastic, and made that animation piece, a little snippet of it there. The characters basically create a little bit of a world, and then they start kind of destroying it as well, but you can watch it online if you'd like to see the whole thing. But it was lovely to bring the 2D characters into a bit more of a 3D look by still keeping the idea that they're shadow puppets in the original rendition. So they don't really turn much, they kind of stay in that 2D format, but they're a little bit more three-dimensional.
And I think the next picture kind of demonstrates that a bit. I'm going to open it up for questions in a minute, so if you can be thinking of questions, I will throw to you in just one moment, but I just wanted to ask about the relationship. So like, because a stop motion puppet is a puppet, but it has very different kind of qualities. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and how you think about that in your practice. Because obviously then for the parade, you're making stuff which is a lot more physical, but then you have a big digital component to your practice as well.
Yeah, so I found it really interesting being alongside the Puppetry Festival and working with puppeteers who are working with live puppetry, because stop motion is quite a different discipline to live puppetry, because really you want the puppet in stop motion to do entirely different things to what you'd want it to do with live puppetry, because in live puppetry you would want it to move with natural physics, you'd want it to be quite flexible and move around a lot, whereas in stop motion animation it's more about stopping things from moving that you don't want to move. And a lot of that is a bit of a battle sometimes, where you're trying to keep everything still and only move specific elements one at a time, which can be quite tricky because you're working against gravity really within that. So in terms of making stop motion puppets, you're looking for something that's quite rigid on the inside as an armature, which could be wire. So I'll make wire puppets using aluminium wire because it's very pliable and it stays in position quite well. It doesn't have a springiness like, say, steel would have. And that allows you to position it. Also ball and socket armatures, which are much more naturalistic movement because it's essentially working like your own body with joints and things like that. They're lovely to work with because they're very smooth and you can tighten them. If you're working with wire, it could be quite snappable as well, and you've got to kind of accommodate for the fact that you're probably going to break the puppet at some point through animating it. But it's been so interesting seeing live puppetry and working a little bit with live puppetry as well, and understanding the differences between those two disciplines, and actually you're trying to do a very opposite thing. But a lot of the making around it is quite similar, like you're using similar materials like sponges, and you're trying to make things as light as possible as well, so you're not fighting against the puppet by making something that's really heavy. But yes, lots of the making processes are very similar, just on a very different scale as well.
Bro, well, so much more to talk about, but do you want to give the opportunity to open it up for questions? So questions, go ahead.
During the rest of the festival, are you going to do a stop motion or animation workshop?
I'm not as part of this festival, but I think that would be something that we'd probably like to look at in the future, doing a stop motion version of a workshop.
But not a stop motion workshop this time around, but yes, yeah, something to consider for the future. Thank you. Other questions for Chloe?
What do you use to shoot a stop motion film on nowadays?
So I would use a digital SLR camera. I feel like things haven't changed that much over the last kind of 5 to 10 years, really. I would work with it tethered, so it's connected to the computer, and I would use Dragon Frame, which is a piece of software which allows you to capture the image, so you don't have to handle the camera at all, which is beneficial because really you don't want to handle it in any way because you don't want it to be moving around. It allows you to have things like onion skinning, which means that you can see the frame you're about to capture and the frames prior to that as well, so you can shoot with knowing like what it is that you're going to be capturing and see it in sequence as well. But my setup's it's quite simple really, and I've got some LED panel lights that I would use to light a set if I'm doing something with a stop motion set. Sometimes use green screen as well. The thing with stop motion is that if you're wanting to create something that's got varying scales within it, sometimes it can be quite difficult to make a set the size that you want it to be, because it would have to be huge in order to make it realistic for the size of the puppet that you're making, because puppets for stop motion, they range from about this tall to maybe maximum about this tall, sometimes smaller. So if you're wanting to make a whole like cityscape or something, it can be quite challenging to do that. So that's where I would combine digital methods and take my stop motion captures into something like After Effects to then composite it together with digital methods.
Can you talk a little bit about that and how you mix the two mediums and whether there's a sort of creative choice around, okay, I've got to do this physically, or now I'm going to take things into a kind of post-production sort of, is it practically based or is it, how do you make that decision?
So the whole process of creating animation is a series of problem solving exercises really, and continually like working out as you're going what the best method is for what you're working with. If I take the stop motion commission for Moving Parts Arts, for example, I knew that the characters would want to be in stop motion animation, but then as I was saying there, with the scale of things, I couldn't possibly create a set to be that size, so I would need to create that digitally, but still using traditional methods at the same time. So using photography to take pictures of paper and then make that into a digital set that the characters could be behind. Sometimes when I'm working with stop motion animation, I'll think that I'll be able to do something in camera and then find that actually there's that classic phrase, I'll fix it in post-production. That happens a lot, where you think, oh, I just need to kind of fix that a little bit and kind of play with it digitally. And I think it's lovely to have that luxury to be able to manipulate things digitally as well, because if I was having to shoot everything by hand, I could be shooting for much, much longer than I would need to try and make something that works. So having that knowledge that I can fix things. Sometimes if a puppet needs to defy gravity, if it was live puppetry, you could easily just do that, but with stop motion animation, you've got nothing holding the puppet up, so you'd need to use a little rig, which is just creating like perhaps a ball and socket armature or something to just hold that puppet up elevated in the air.
Do you use fishing wire at all?
No, because if it was something that's suspended, it would move around too much. It would be kind of spinning, and so I would tend to use something that's more anchored to the base, and then would need to remove that in post-production, so painting it out in the frames to make it as if it wasn't there at all. And I think that's the thing where there's so much illusion in stop motion animation, because some of the things just aren't possible by the puppet itself.
Yeah. And then on this commission, because you were working with a script as well, and I've heard you speak before about working to a brief, and you quite enjoy that process. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I find within my kind of creative discipline that I really love working to something, even if it's as small as the theme is seahorses, then it sort of sets the imagination going. I quite like working within the perimeters of having a brief to go off, because I think it sparks a lot of ideas and almost gives a confidence to develop something, because you know that it's something that's been asked to be done, and kind of progress from there. And I think that's where the problem solving comes into things as well, where if you've got a brief to start with, you're kind of problem solving your way to the final outcome, final piece, I think.
Brilliant. So, other questions for Chloe?
Yeah. So how do you go about storytelling with stop motion? Because I know you're because of the lengthiness of the process, you're telling stories in a much shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
I'm just interested in how that process works.
Yeah, so really, I suppose I would storyboard things out first, to make sure a story could come across in a short amount of time. And I think sometimes with particularly stop motion animation, you know that the process is going to take such a long time that it sounds bad in a way, but I suppose as part of animation, your entire process is kind of working out, do I need to do this bit? Or can I tell this in a different way? Like, what's the clearest way I can put this thing across without exceptional effort and time taken? because it's just so much part of the process of that. Like, can I reuse sections to make this actually feasible? Because it is quite an arduous process. You need a lot of patience to be able to create a stop motion animation. So I suppose throughout the whole thing, you're working out what's the clearest and best way of me telling this story. And I think as part of animation, you can do so much with characters' facial expressions and eyes, which is sometimes a little bit more tricky with live puppetry, where you haven't necessarily got so much capability to change the character's facial expressions. And you can do so much with like blinking and just keeping that character alive without having to animate too much in the scene. And I think that can tell a lot in a storytelling context.
So do certain stories lend themselves to stop motion, would you say?
Well, I think dark stories really lend themselves to stop motion animation, because the process can look a little bit kind of uncanny and it can be a little bit clunky, and that really lends itself to the stories that you're telling. But it can also be very light-hearted and fun. Like if we think about Wallace and Gromit, say, the stories there are so light-hearted and playful, and I think there's kind of two sides to that puppetry where in stop motion, where you've got that kind of dark storytelling, but then you've also got things that are very light-hearted and playful and silly, and they both come together really nicely with stop motion animation.
Yes, no, really interesting. Yeah. Other questions, please?
Do you use voices as well, or not really?
Sometimes, but I tend to try and avoid doing lip sync, because it is so tricky to try and make your character talk like it should. I have done in some pieces, and the preparation for that's incredible, because you're having to create lots and lots of different mouth shapes and use like replacement techniques to swap one out for another. So sometimes, yes, I have worked with voices, but it's not something I necessarily enjoy doing, because I think it's so much part of it's almost like you've got to work it all out beforehand. And then when you're animating, you're kind of just going through the process. When you're not kind of thinking about it, you're just kind of doing, because you have to have worked it all out in advance and just kind of go through the motions of what you've previously planned. It feels like there's less flexibility in that.
So if you're using voices, is that typically, I guess that's done beforehand and then you're working to that?
Yes,
or,
yeah, and then yes, definitely, you'd have to do it in that kind of order, and you'd have to break up each like syllable of the voice, and because you're working with like 12 frames per second as a minimum, that's a lot to try and work out with a phrase that someone's saying. And there's also a lot of gesture within that as well. It's not just the shapes of the mouth, it's also the way that you move your hands and your face as well to convey the spoken word.
Highly technical, alongside the more playful, like you say. Yeah.
Is there a particular material you like working with? Because I think I've seen a lot of your puppets and it's been a mixture of kind of clay, needle, felt. So is there like a particular material where you thought, like, I don't know, it was interesting to work with?
Well, I think that as part of stop motion animation, part of the joy of it is gathering things together to work with. And they're often, I suppose, like puppetry, there's some things that these are the materials that you'll use that are the right materials for the job. Like I mentioned aluminium wire earlier, that is definitely something I would say that's the right type of material for that particular thing. But in terms of fabrication, on the top surface of the puppet, you can really work with so many different things that you kind of found. I did a music video called Lady of the Lake, and that was a lovely one to work on, because I gathered like lichens and bits of twig, but then also like beads and kind of more like accessories and like little bits of kind of trinkets and things like that, and put that all together as part of the puppet. And for that one as well, I work with silicone. So I cast that puppet, which was a very long process a lot of learning there because so much can go wrong as part of casting, because you've got to make your first puppet like in, say, plasticine or something like that, and then make a mould for it, and then fill that with the dragon skin, which is the type of silicone that I would use, and pigment it and put the armature in the inside as part of that casting process. You can get bubbles in it, and sometimes it's quite tricky to colour as well, but it was really good to create like a flesh texture that you just couldn't really get with any other material, so I really enjoyed working with that. But I would say just like gathering lots of different things, and sometimes I would have made like a puppet just based on one thing that I would have, like I knew that the eyes wanted to be made of this particular thing, and then have to design like the whole scale of everything else around these eyes that I'd used for this dragon puppet that I'd made. So yeah, just kind of gathering lots of different, potentially very everyday materials to use for that particular purpose.
So what I would love to do is, we've talked a lot about your animation as in films and the commission. Could we have a look at the applications of your animation?
Yes.
Because you've got some interesting stuff around the inventors.
Yes. Yes, so I've worked quite a lot with Little Inventors.
Yeah.
Now, they are an organisation led by Dominic Wilcox, who asks young people to come up with invention ideas. They are sometimes driven by a particular focus on a brief, a particular like problem that needs solving. Sometimes they're more about how young people can solve everyday problems in their lives. And then makers or animators are asked to create those as real world things, either animations or actually inventions that fully work in real life. And because it's working with young people, they come up with some absolutely fantastic, wonderful ideas. Sometimes they're quite silly, sometimes they're very, very practical. This is an example of one which was a washing machine, which would do all of the washing machine jobs. So it would not only wash the clothes, but it would gather them, sort them, put the powder in the washing machine as well. And this is where I think it's that fun aspect of stop motion animation that it really lends itself to. And these were all
This is
models.
all physical.
Yeah, all physical. And as part of these projects, you're also invited to work with the young person that's come up with the idea as well, which helps push things further. It means that you've got conversations with them about why they came up with the idea that they have and how they would like to see it realised in a real world or animated world thing. And this one was again for Little Inventors. This was part of the UN challenges of how to kind of address like really global problems. The young person that came up with this idea came up with a way of harnessing methane from cows. I really love this picture because the whole project went over to Geneva at one of the UN conferences, and this is such a classic important person wearing a suit and a briefcase, and they're looking at this very silly invention. And I've got that as a little animation as well. Could have the sound for that one.
Amazing. I think it's just It's just such a good example of kind of what we do and thinking about those applications and impact of our work, you know, taking it to Geneva and communicating these ideas. I think it's really fantastic. We're out of time. There's so much more that we could have talked about because Chloe does loads of stuff with moving parts, so all of the parades, but also Teeny Tiny Toon, the Red Kite that was on, which was around last weekend, Cardboard Road. So you can find, this is the Red Kite, so beautiful puppet that you made for Gateshead?
Yes, Gateshead Council in celebration of the Red Kite being established in the region because it was reintroduced. So I think it was 20 years celebration of it being in the area. Yeah.
They can find out more about you. You've got a website, I assume?
Yes, it's chloerodham.co.uk.
But also lots of stuff on movingpartsarts.co.uk. And you can see a lot more of Chloe's stuff there. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you very much, Chloe.